Hey guys, and welcome to this episode of Metacast. We are here with Phil McCordic, writer and host of Science Max, but also the voice of Ginkai in Medabots. How you doing?
I'm good, Grady. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. The sun will slowly start shining in through this window behind me as it becomes a bit more morning, but yeah,
It's
it's
fun
a
to
good day.
to talk across the time zones there. I miss New Zealand. New Zealand's a lovely place. I traveled through all of New Zealand from the top to the bottom. Did the Southern Island in a minivan or what camper van.
Yeah.
Uh, and I have very fond memories of going down a giant steep switchback mountain with a sheer drop on one side, driving a stick shift minivan on the wrong side of the road. I aged several years during that 20-minute descent.
Yeah, the North Island's definitely where our population is, but that South Island's where all the fun is.
Yeah, the South Island's pretty cool. I did everything. I bungee jumped. I did a canyon swing. We flew over the mountains. It's awesome. It's totally awesome.
Um, and you your background is pretty much entirely in children's shows. I look at the Wikipedia page and we got the B Zone, Mad Science Touring Show, Crawl Space, all before Medabots. What caused you to make that jump and to do a voice acting role with Medabots?
Well, a funny story actually. That I was a host on a show called TVO Kids, which is an interstitial show on TV Ontario, and I replaced Joe Motiki. Joe was leaving the show, and I'm the person that they hired to, replace him with our co-host Patty, who was there. And so that Joe left, and there was a big, farewell with all the kids saying goodbye. And then could have come in, and Joe Motiki's shoes are like it's giant, man. Like I can't. How do you try to replace Joe Motiki? Like he's so cool and fun, and I am not cool. Like I am all the kids were like, we want a new host, and we hope he's like really as cool as Joe and really like awesome. And I'm like, I have none of the qualities that Joe has. Like all the things that make Joe are so like awesome. And I'm like, I'm a goofball, like weirdo geek kind of guy. Fortunately, that worked out. The kids liked me for who I was, but I was terrified of the shadow that Joe Motiki left when I replaced him on that show. So but it's pretty fun. And Joe and I, like, we don't work on very much together, but we cross paths very frequently, and we often all go out for for drinks with all the alumni of the TVO Kids space, which a lot of us have moved up quite a bit in kids TV in Canada. So it's fun to see all of the same people again. So it's kind of like a proving ground, I guess, as it were. Um, but yeah, it was at that moment on that show where I was a host, and it was a really great job. Like you go in and you do it's live TV in between the shows from basically 3:30 in the afternoon till 7 Monday through Friday. And we would come up with skits and we would have all this fun. Sometimes the breaks were like 2.5 minutes, sometimes they were 15 seconds. Like best job you could ever have. And I knew, like, you get the job as an actor, which is what I trained for. And I knew that maybe the next job may never exist. Like you get this great job as an actor, but you are completely at the mercy of like just the whims of people who just are making a random choice. Like you go out for
Yeah.
commercial auditions and you walk into a room of 50 people who look just like you, and your job is to say, this chocolate bar tastes great. Like, how are you going to pick? Dude, you can't pick. There's no way that you can guarantee a living as an actor, no matter how good you are. And so it was at that moment that I decided I really needed to start expanding my offerings, my careers in the industry. So I really like tried to get into writing, which I was writing the show like that we were on, but I wasn't officially a writer. I was a producer, and so I didn't have any credits to my name. So I started reaching out to, people I knew through TVO and other contacts, and I wrote on a show called Kids Canada, which is sort of like a national Nat Geo, just traveling around and seeing the places, and that was like my first break into the business. But Medabots came fairly closely after that. I think I was still at TVO when I was writing Medabots, and the work was it's very specialized. Writing the show, I mean, have you talked to other writers of the show before?
We had Rob Tinkler on who
Oh,
did some
Rob
of the
Tinkler,
early
of
stuff.
course.
Yeah.
Yes, we worked a bunch together. But it's like they give you the script, right? And a Japanese show is very different in not to mention like all the stuff that gets lost in translation, where like it's written out and you're like, what does that even mean? It's like, why is there cake? And you're like, why did they say that? There's no cake. Is that an expression? And so basically, you just sort of you have a lot of leeway given the lip flap. Like you have to have the right number of syllables that you say. But and there's this funny thing as well, as I'm sure you know, as a fan of Japanese like stuff, their pacing is very different than North American pacing. They're totally fine with a long silence, to build up tension or just give a sense of the mood. Like you can go like you're 20 seconds without anybody saying anything. That is unacceptable in North American television. You do not go 20 seconds without somebody saying something because kids will completely walk away, apparently. So the trick is that they are talking and you can't have them talking if they're not talking. So what you do is you give it to the character who is not talking. So they're in a two shot, right? And this person's facing this person. Then you put words in the mouth of this person who you can't see while this person stares at them. And then you switch. And now this person is going to give a response. This person is going to give a response, which is, but normally it's just a standoff. Like in the Japanese, like neither of them is saying anything. There's this long moment of silence, but we're like giving the person who's back of the head, you can see like all these lines. So whenever you see lines, the back of a character's head, all of those have been written in completely like out of whole cloth because I'm pretty sure none of those lines existed in the Japanese version. So anyway, that was sort of like how I got into writing for anime. I did a few gigs on the other side. I was an actor. I tried to break in a bit in voice acting, and I did some anime there. I think that's how I got the contact on a show that I can't even remember, so it's not on my resume because I don't remember what show it was. But it was, I think, only did 1 or 2 episodes, but it was terrifying. I'm sure you've gotten some voice actors telling you about Rhythmo Band. Have they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the old style of doing things, which was like, as a new actor, like just like a young, fresh-faced kid, I'm fairly good with my voice. I could, I felt like I belonged in the animation world. But I'd never I heard of it, but no one ever gave it to me. And so like they got this thing, you walk in and then they got this big strip along the back wall. And then the words whip along. And as they cross the line right here, you're supposed to say the words, right? And that's it's not that hard, but it really takes some time to sort of get used to that. Like you're not just reading it out loud. You have to read it exactly when it hits the line and the words are spaced out so that it matches every lip flap of the characters, right? And that's not easy to do right off the cuff. And I got the job just reading lines in the audition. Then I walk in and there's like all these executives behind the glass and I'm just a bit player. I'm some kid that they took a chance on to hire. And they're like, all right, go. And then the Rhythmo Man starts going by and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I just start reading and they're like, stop. You have to read it when the word gets to the line. And I'm like, okay. And I do it again. And they're like, yeah, but you have to be in character while you're reading. I'm like, right, also be in character. And so I was trying to do the character voice. And then I'm like, and they're like, now you're losing the emotion and you've slipped character and you're off the line. And I'm like, okay, no, I can do it. And I did it like a whole bunch of takes. And then they went, okay, that's good. And I was like, is it good? Or is it kind of like, let's just get this guy out of the room and get somebody else to actually come in and do this right? And I walked away just completely petrified of the whole process. It was, which is unfair. It's unfair to do that to someone. Like if they had like let me come in to see it and practice it like in my head while somebody else read, like 20 minutes, I would have been, but that 20 minutes was spent sweating while we did take after take of me getting good enough to, oh my God. But then, all the budgets went down and the persons whose job it was to meticulously write out on the Rhythmo Band, they got fired. And everybody said, just watch the character and try to match your dialogue to their lip flap, which was how we did Medabots. And it's a lot less terrifying because people don't expect you to get it perfectly the first time. So that's how I, oh, right. So then I'm writing the show. The Ginkai is in season 2 or season 3? I can't remember.
Season 3, I believe.
Season 3, right. So Ginkai's new to season 3, and I was a new writer on season 3. And so I was one of the first people to have a script with him in it. And so I was the one who developed, like, as the writer, I was like, what if he's like, oh, okay. Like, that's his catchphrase, like, oh, okay. And so I would just like write, ho, 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 okay. And then, so then they would, I went down to sort of see the thing, and they were talking to me, the execs were talking to me about the script. We would have meetings to come in back in the days before COVID, when you could actually go in and see people. They'd come in and they give you some notes, and they talk about this next scene and what do you think about here, which was nice to go in every once in a while. Writers don't get that. And so I'm pitching them the okay. They're like, what's this? And like, so he's like, oh, okay. Like, he's always like kind of like doing this with his hands and going, oh, okay. And they looked at each other and they're like, you want to do the voice? And I was like, okay. I mean, oh, okay. And they laughed, and that was it. That was how I became Ginkai. I didn't audition. I didn't go through the normal channels. I became it because I came up with the line as a writer, I guess, as part of the process. But it was for a lot of us, that show was a seminal moment. It was like the beginning of a lot of our careers. And many people went on to, like, be like Joe is like, he was already great, but like, he's become like a, just a heavy hitter in the kids animation industry now. Like, he's like the, voice guy. He's got an amazing voice, obviously, but it's like, that was one, I think it was one of his first, you would know even better than me. Like, that was one of his first, right? His full on gigs. So yeah, I mean, it was one of my first gigs as a writer. And, the first, it's funny, I suppressed the name of the show that I did that one bit part on. So it's never going to be on my resume, but like my therapist says, I can let it go, but I can't. But that's my first like anime credit, like my first, VO credit, and one of my first writing credits. It was really cool to have that show be part of that process. And you learn so much, like people like Rob Tinkler, who've been around forever, an amazing writer, amazing voice actor, does all this stuff. He was like, he wasn't at the beginning of his career. Again, I'm asking you because you probably know. I think he'd already done it.
Yeah, a couple of things beforehand.
Yeah, and I'd ended up writing on a few of his shows later on, like Almost Naked Animals that he did later on, and I was writing for him. So it's like we all kind of like gelled together. Though you don't often see this, you don't see people who do the voiceover sessions. You don't see them at the same time, but we all kind of like knew we were working on it. But there was one episode which we talked about where Ginkai's talking to the Screws. And I think it was Rob's script. I don't remember. It wasn't mine. But I hold it up in such high regard because I was like, that is genius. Because he's basically there at a playground. He's standing on a concrete structure and he's telling them to get out of there. And the Japanese was just like, go away, stop bothering me, I'm busy, right? And I think it was Rob's script. And he wrote, and stay away from my apartment, which meant that this concrete thing he was living in on the play, like he was living in there in the playground, which is just such a genius line that was not in the Japanese, that the writer was able to add to the show. And I was like, ever since then, I was like, okay, you can totally turn stuff on its head. Which have you ever gotten a chance to watch the Japanese with like the different writing? I don't know if it exists out there, or is it just is English Medabots that exists now?
I believe you can find the subtitled Japanese stuff as well.
Like, you'll find that a lot of the plots diverge, like to a certain degree, because I would find myself like writing something visually that happened that the Japanese never mentioned, like a stick falls over in the background because somebody put a cane down or something. And then like, it's like, what are you doing? You broke my stick. I didn't break it. It's sitting right there. It's fine. No, you broke it. And we have this like thing, even though it was never really dealt with, but then it's like becomes this thing between these two characters. And then they just you have it every time they have a scene together in the same episode. It's like, oh, it's all about, you broke my stick. Would you let it go? And it's like, all of this stuff is just does not exist in the Japanese. And I'm like, okay, I got to get it. I'm on this like little tangent that I have now created as the writer of the, the guy who's supposed to be like loyally translating what's going on in the Japanese. And it's way over here. And I got to get it back to the plot because now the Japanese script is going through important plot points that I have to put later on because I haven't resolved the stick issue yet. So, but it'd be fun to sort of see like just how far, maybe it's only my scripts, I don't know, but it'd be fun to see just how far the scripts diverge in the Western version because sometimes we're forced because you can't have silence. So you just got to start creating a plot point. But yeah, there was a lot of good moments and I learned a lot of good lessons, in terms of like just how far you could push it, which was as long as it makes sense to what's going on screen, they were totally fine with it. Yeah. Very few executives, I think, even read the Japanese to compare what was going on. They just watched it and were like, yeah, it makes sense to me. I think we could have probably, I could have made Ginkai the hero, I suppose. Now that I think about it, I could have rewritten him to being like an Obi-Wan Kenobi sort of figure. Like, that's why he's never been mentioned before, because he had to seek him out. I never, I missed that opportunity, but if I ever did it again, there you go. That's going in there.
Just completely switch it up and change everything.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Why not? Yeah. Medabots doesn't like anyone. He's a total jerk all the time. Yeah, why not?
This is the Medabots 2021 script we're writing.
It's the up aged, newer, more edgy Medabots for the 6-year-olds going on 15, as they all are now.
Yeah. So obviously you've been in the writer's room as well as in front of the microphone, specifically on Medabots, but you've done heaps of stuff afterwards as well. Do you have a preference between those two?
Yeah, I'm also like on camera a lot, and on camera is great. It is the most fun on camera or on mic. Being an actor is the most fun you can have. Mm-hmm. It is nonstop fun. It is super, unless you're like really worried, like that you're not getting the rhythmo band right. And then it can be a nightmare. But most of the time when you get to perform, it is so great. Like you're laughing and you're doing the take and it's kind of funny and everybody in the booth is laughing. And then you try it again. And it's just a wonderful thing. It's just not something that unless you're Joe Motiki or some of the other, the icons on Medabots that most of us, can do for a living, you need to sort of like do the rest. And the other parts of the creation process are so linked. To write a script, like I write, I direct, I produce, I edit, I do everything. I do the entire gamut, all just so that I don't end up being a waiter again, which was like the only goal for my whole career, is just to stay in television, whatever I had to do. But I find that the instinct behind the acting and writing and directing is all the same creative thing. Like I want it in my head to look like this or to sound like this. And then you make it happen given whatever tools are available to you to do that. So either you write it, what you see in your head, or as the director, you sort of plot it out, or as the actor, you physically perform it. And it all comes from the same muscle. It all comes from the same place in your brain, and the endorphin rush that you get from being a creative, for being someone like me who just enjoys the creative process so much that it is, while being an actor is more fun, they're all super great. Like it's always a satisfying thing to create something and go, I made that. And I enjoy watching it. I think it's fun to look at. If no one else is entertained, I at least am entertained by it. And I think it's, it is it's a privilege and a burden to, make your living in this industry. It's, whatever contract you get only lasts for 6 weeks or 6 months, depending on what role you are in a show. And then it's like, that's it. That could be the last time you ever work. You never know. And it's like, it's really terrifying. Even when you get to like a certain level of a career, like I am. I've like 2 fully produced shows and I make all kinds of stuff. I'm still, I don't know, I could spend like the rest of my career unemployed just for no other reason than I just never found the right niche again. So it's super rewarding and it's super terrifying all at the same time. Does that, hopefully that giant answer is enough.
Yeah. It's I think one piece there really resonated, and that was the just being creative and just having something that you've made there at the end that you can just look at and be happy with. I think so many people try to not necessarily make something for somebody else, but they're not appreciative themselves or really like what they're doing. Especially those of us who are stuck in, I guess, a traditional 9 to 5 job, and just seeing the creative aspects, and being happy and fulfilled, and just making yourself happy first is a great thing.
Yeah, I find it's also the team you work with, and the vibe, the vibe of a show. Like a lot of shows are different. Some are like super high pressure. Some are like totally fun. Kids is often a big mix of, I'm talking more from my experience in like live action kids TV, which is my wheelhouse more than animation. But the vibe on set in kids TV is everybody helps, everybody pulls. There's no like union guy going, I only do lighting, I'm not going to help you move the thing because no, everybody helps. Everybody's having a good time. There's no budget for anything. So everybody's pitching in, but the vibe is always really happy and fun because you're making fun stuff for kids, man. And it's like, the jokes you can make on a kid's show are they can still be just as funny. Like, there's lots of jokes you can't make, obviously, but the jokes that you can make can still be great, and when you make television that's good, like Medabots is, like, it's a good show, like it's fun, and it's it's got like an appeal that obviously is very far reaching, and that means something to people. It's such a rewarding experience, and especially when you had such a good time making it. There's a lot of like forgetting how awful it is to have a show that ended up being good at the end, but forgetting how horrible it was to make. But shows like Medabots were like, I wasn't there for the entire creation process, but it's a ton of fun. And I remember making like, laughing so much during the VO sessions, just when you nail the lip flap just right, but then you put in like a little tweak, like, I don't know about that. What do you think? It's like that little tweaks like that, and everybody's laughing in the VO suite, and you're like, oh yeah. And then we watch it again, and you're like, oh man, that's so great. This could be a story for me who didn't do it as much, maybe, as some of the other voiceover actors who, of course they do that. That's just a thing that they do. But I find that the reward of what you do is often as much a factor of the environment you're doing it, rather than specifically what it is you're doing. You know what I mean? Which I find, a lot of people forget, or in their own jobs, or like finding their own joy in stuff. I have left, amazing jobs because like the job itself was great. The show that I was making was great, but the vibe was just no fun. And, while you're, making it, you're just like, there's just a moment of joy that you're just not getting. And it's like, it's nowhere near as good as making just a mediocre show, but having a great time making it. It's like, I don't know, there's something much more pleasurable to that. Something that's a long career sustaining, just nothing but mediocre shows, but have a great time making all of them would be just fine. But, to get to work on something like Medabots, which is great in all respects, is super awesome,
Just before we move on to some of your live action stuff, just to wrap up the Medabots, is there any other sort of lines or moments or funny stories that you remember from your time, either in the writing room or behind the mic?
The specter of Joe Motikian is kind of like, he's just so good. Like his voice is just, I mean, you've talked to Joe. Joe is like, he's like that. I'm just going to tell you right now, he's like that all the time. Like I go out for a beer with Joe, he is on every second. He's like, "What's up? How you doing? What's going on with you? Yeah, just chilling it, just hanging out, just being me." You know, it's like, man, Joe is just Joe. He's just like that all the time. It's so hilarious. So he doesn't turn that on for the camera, but like his voice, when you hear it, like you're listening to the headphones, and it's just like, just energetic, resonant, like just awesome character voice. It's just intimidating, man. It's so intimidating when Ginkai had a line and then Medabots has a line, or Medabots has a line and Ginkai. And I'm like, oh man. It's like, you just hate to follow Joe, right? It's just because he's got such a great. And then I'm like, my voice isn't that good. Like, I'm just not that good. You know, I've got my skills, but like being that like excellent a voice actor, you know, I can do some character stuff, but my normal speaking voice just doesn't have that, you know, I don't know if basso profundo is the right term. I don't know if Joe is in the bass range. Is he more of a baritone? I don't know. But anyway, whatever the right range to define Joe's voice, and he's just so good at it. But when you hear that in the super high fidelity headphones, and then your line comes next, you're like, oh God, I can't compare. So, which I'm hoping it doesn't translate in the actual show. that I just didn't feel of the same caliber, but yeah. And other ones like you know, Julie Lemieux is in the show too. Like, right? Yeah. Okay. For a second, she's like, I mean, I don't know if you've heard her in other stuff, but she's incredible. Like, she's like mind-blowingly good. Like, I had her come into it, like audition for a show I made called Zerby Derby, which is a live-action remote control car show, which is like Thomas the Tank Engine, but with cars, and they're all remote control with animatronic eyes. It was super fun. And I was thinking, like, do we do a kid character? And so Julie came in to do a voice, and she's like, would you like that to be a kid? And then did like an exact impression of a 6-year-old kid. Like if you weren't looking at her, you would think that there was a 6-year-old kid in the booth. It was scary, like just how good. And then she did, would you like a guy or a girl, like a boy or a girl? And then she did a 6-year-old boy and then a 6-year-old girl. Very different voices, all coming from the same adult. And it was like terrifying how amazing that is. So it's like, it is fun to work alongside just amazing people, and especially when you're an actor and you can appreciate the craft that some of these people bring to what they do. You know, like I said, my skill sets lie in other areas. I can explain science to kids in a way that they can get better than anybody else. I can make science super fun with my natural enthusiasm. That's what I got. When it comes to voice acting, I'm just like, I bow down to these guys in terms of like how good they are. I just love working with them.
So talking about science, we'll move on over Science Max, one of the live action kids shows that you do a lot on.
Yeah, I basically I pitch it like Bill Nye meets Mythbusters. So basically, you take a kid science experiment and then you just try to do it as big as you can, and you naturally will fail a bunch of times trying to make it happen, which is part of the show. I pitched it as it's a show about failure, which nobody wanted to hear. Like, no executive was like, no, we don't like to use the word failure. And I'm like, but why? I mean, I guess failure has bad connotations, but like just trying again. Like, it doesn't work, then you figure out why it doesn't work, and then you change something, and then you try it again. You test your hypothesis, and I mean, that's basically science. But it was a hard sell. I got to tell you, it was actually a hard sell. All of my shows have been a hard sell. Everything I've ever, you know, personally made. I made Zerby Derby, which is like a live action car show, and I'm like, I designed the animatronics myself and made a car, and then I drove it up to the exec in the pitch meeting at our big conference called Kid Screen way back. And you know, I drove it up to the table and I looked up at him with the remote. And so then I walked up to the table and I put it on top and I go, here's the show. And they're like, so it's a car show. And I'm like, yeah, it's about a bunch of cars, you know, anamorphized car, anamorphized. Yeah, great voice acting, Phil. Anyway, so anthropomorphized. There you go. I nailed it. Third take. And they're like, this is great. They're like, look at this. You built all the animatronics. So is it animated? And I was like, no, it's right here. I mean, it's going to be live action. And they're like, oh, okay. So why not make it animated? I'm like, because Nothing like that exists out there. There is no live action. Thomas the Tank Engine is the only thing, or Theodore Tugboat are the only things like that are live action. And this is going to be like kind of very different, much higher pace, faster paced and stuff. And they're like, so it's brand new and unique. And I'm like, wait a minute. They don't like it because it's unique? And they're like, because then nobody wants to take a risk, right? Cars, great. Kids love cars, but do we want to take a risk on this car show because it's different? I'm like, why do you want, what? How does that? That's not, everybody tells a story. You pitch something new, pitch something unique, and then everybody loves it. And that's not how it goes. You know, it's the same thing with science. Like, they're like, oh, it's pretty educational. It's got science in the name. I'm like, because it's about science. And like, yeah, but educational shows, they're not that popular. And I'm like, well, this one will be. I don't know what else to tell you. It's like, but you don't want to tell the kids that you're teaching them something. It's like, why? It's like, if you make it fun, they don't care. But again, it was a hard sell. It still is a hard sell. Like a lot of broadcasters don't want it because, we don't want an educational show. So, but despite that, it is totally taken off. It's been really fun to work on. And I get kids reaching out all the time to explain, everything from the theory of relativity to how vaccines work, which comes up very frequently lately. So it's been a joy. And I'm, producing it myself, like writing, producing, editing. We didn't have the money for graphics, so I learned After Effects. That's what life's like in kids TV.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of stuff is super fun. So that's what I'm working on lately. There's my pitch. There's my plug.
And usually we'll also do this other bit at the end, but you mentioned it there. If a child listening to this does want to get a hold of you and maybe has some science questions, or they remember Medabots and they're no longer a child, what sort of social media links do you have that people might want to reach out to you on?
Phil McCordic is my current link. It's a YouTube channel. It's on Facebook, Twitter, wherever. Generally, you can find, if you just Google Science Max on YouTube, I hope that you find, I'm trying really hard. I've got a personal channel as well until I can get the licensing of the Science Max YouTube channel, which I'm working really hard to do because I want to continue making content even if we're not making new seasons of the show. Right now we're not. So I got my own personal channel, which is legally distinct, yet still doing science. So I'm hoping that the search rankings are getting it in YouTube high enough so that you can look up one and find me as a way in the other, but I'll get there eventually, or I'll get back on the YouTube channel and then it won't matter. You can find me there. So
I know when I was doing research and stuff and I searched your name, I found stuff like the YouTube channel and saw really a lot of fun science videos on there as well. If you can't track down Science Max.
Yeah, the one where I explain chemistry to myself, I'm quite proud of. Where basically I come into a shop and it's on green screen and like I'm having a conversation teaching myself chemistry. Both from a production point of view and from the educational point of view. We start with so simple where people are like, I know all this, but by the time you get to the end, you're able to like build a molecule just by the equation. And I'm like, yeah, I felt pretty good about that in terms of like just taking people one step at a time until they got to this level, which is pretty cool.
And I guess, is there anything else that you want to mention to anybody who's listening to this, either from the Medabots side, the science side, or anything?
No, man, just keep it like, Oh yeah, here's my final send off. Stuff like Medabots and like Pixar and Disney. I've always had this thing in kids TV, and if you ever in this situation again, and you wonder like, why are some kids shows just abhorrent to adults and kids love them, and then some kids shows are just totally watchable by adults and adults love them too. And people have various names for it, co-viewing or friendly or whatever. I call it the Barney line. There's a line where Barney the dinosaur exists. On one side of the line, you get your Pixar, you get your Disney, like Moana. It's a great movie. I love that movie. I watch that movie every single day. It's such a good movie. It's so fun. And, or any of the Pixar stuff, Medabots on this side of the Barney line, super fun for adults to watch. Everything on the other side of the Barney line, just nails on a chalkboard, right? So whenever it comes to talking about kids TV, you can always classify a kids show into one of two categories, on this side of the Barney line or on that side of the Barney line. And I hope it becomes a thing that everybody starts saying, oh, it's on the wrong side of the Barney line for me.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking time for talking to
No
us
worries,
today.
Grady. Thank you for having me. This has been fun.